questions I found myself pondering as I sat down to write the script for this video was this. Given what the John Wick franchise is, and given what the audience expects from it, is it really fair to hold it to the same kind of narrative standard as something like Gladiator or Lord of the Rings? The answer, of course, is no. We're here for the action, the spectacle, and the guns. That being said, I firmly believe that simply because we're here for one reason, it doesn't mean that the others can fall by the wayside. Good writing is always something that should be striven for, and will always elevate a project beyond anything visual spectacle can provide. And, well, John Wick Chapter 2 may not be anywhere near the schlock of something like a modern MCU movie, the cracks in its foundation certainly began to show. I suspect the reasoning for this was that the studio wanted a quick turnaround on the script so they could capitalize on the popularity of the first movie. So on the one hand, I get it. But on the other, I really feel like it does a disservice to the IP, especially after a story that was as tight as the first movies. So, when you take that into account, along with the fact that the action sequences themselves are hamstrung by both narrative and real-world problems, this second outing isn't really as up to par as the first. So the vast majority of the action in this movie measures up to that of the first, often exceeding it in most cases. But, and this is a big fat hairy but, the script seems to have been written to make room for it, rather than the other way around. As an example, take Wick's initial fight in the first movie. He's defending himself and his home from goons as a byproduct of Viggo Tarasov trying to preemptively remove a threat. Makes perfect sense, right? His first major set piece in Chapter 2 is the result of him going back into the cab garage after he'd already escaped with his car. From a narrative and writing perspective, it just doesn't hang. But from an entertainment perspective, it does. We get a cool car chase, followed by a cool hand-to-hand sequence. Damn the continuity. Now, the counter-argument to that is that he has to get the truce with Abraham Tarasov. To which I say, what's wrong with a phone call? He already called the guy once, just do it again. It's this kind of story construction that ends up plaguing the rest of the series, but we'll get to that in future videos. While we're here in the garage, though, I'd like to bring up my second problem with this movie. That being Keanu Reeves' age. Don't get me wrong, the guy's an animal. And I sure as hell couldn't do half the stuff he's doing in this movie. But you can definitely see that he's lost a step. If we look at the cab sequence again, we can see that the stuntmen are already waiting for their cues to move in on Wick, which in turn drags down the pacing of the entire sequence. Honestly, it's why I prefer the gunplay over the martial arts. The action can be much faster because you've only got to point in the stuntman's general direction and he'll go down. This isn't to discredit the firearms training that Reeves did for these movies or anything, but rather it's just the simple fact. I'd also like to mention that this sequence is one of only 2 moments in the movie where we actually see John become the Baba Yaga. His infiltration of both the cab garage and the D'Antonio estate perfectly exemplify the why behind John Wick's legend. If we look at this from a random goon's perspective, John truly is a ghost, gaining access to highly secure facilities in the execution of his missions. He silently removes any opposition in his path, and even manages to access the inner sanctum of a member of the High Table without so much as a whisper of opposition. Now, as much as I'd like to see one of these missions go flawlessly, i.e. he gets in and out without being seen, I understand that isn't why we're here. He's got to get caught so that we can have those balls-to-the-wall fight sequences the series helped create. I get it, I really do. But I still can't help but wonder what it would look like if John managed to complete a mission with a body count of 1, that being the person he was sent there to kill. Now, as expected of any sequel, this movie pushes John's story forward. For better or worse, it's the continuation of a narrative that hasn't quite gone off the rails yet. John's got his car back, he's ready to move on with his life, and the story of the first movie is tied up with a bow. His whole frame of mind is showcased by the way in which he carelessly returns the tools of his former trade to their resting place. He doesn't clean his guns, he doesn't wash his suit, he just dumps everything back into the chest and reseals it away. This is good. It's character development. It's showing rather than telling. Then all of that gets flushed away by the arrival of Santino D'Antonio and the marker that John granted him. Now, the concept of the marker is an interesting one. It's a verified favor, with a paper trail I might add, granted to someone that can be called in at any point, regardless of what the returning favor is. But its implementation in this movie creates more problems than it solves. For one, it becomes a trope that is exploited for the rest of the series, that being a new rule and MacGuffin that is introduced at exactly the right moment to move the plot forward. And these are always new rules and MacGuffins that, to the audience, seem to retcon the already established world building, but are no surprise to the characters involved. For example, In the first movie, Winston says the only rule that cannot be broken is that no business may be conducted on the Continental grounds. But in the second one, he says,
"Two rules that cannot be broken, Jonathan. No blood on Continental grounds, and every marker must be honored."
Now, I get it. It is necessary that some contrivances like this are going to occur. No script is flawless, and sometimes you've just got to make a leap to keep the plot moving forward. But, and there's that but again, this type of writing became ingrained in the series. Whenever the writers were struggling a bit to move forward, they just threw in another MacGuffin that got John where he needed to go. Second, this marker creates a massive plot hole in the movie's narrative overall. We learn that this marker was granted to Santino by John in exchange for some unspecified help in the execution of John's impossible task. The impossible task being the event that allowed him to escape his life of murder and crime. Brushing aside the fact that this kind of undermines John's legendary status for having completed said task alone, the main issue is this. Why, if Santino knew that John was planning to leave the life, would he accept a marker as payment for his services? A marker that he, at that moment in time, knew he could never call in. He didn't know John was going to come back, let alone at the absolute perfect moment for him to assassinate Santino's sister. It's a contrivance that honestly shakes the foundations of this movie, and given its sheer importance to the narrative, it's not one that can be easily rectified. Next, I want to discuss the body armor problem. On its face, this is a baller piece of kit that allows Wick to be a little more tanky, and removes the Stormtrooper issue from the script. And by that I mean the goons he encounters narratively need to have terrible aim so that John doesn't get shot in the face. It's a cute workaround, but once again it creates more problems than it solves. By establishing that this tech exists, you've now opened it up for use by John's enemies, thereby rendering pretty much every gunfight exactly the same. Both sides raise their suit jackets up to protect their bodies and close the distance for a sparring match. All of the tension in any given gunfight is removed, because both sides now have body armor that is effectively impenetrable.
That vest is bulletproof!
Oh, ow!
But it is, a vest.
For an IP that leans so heavily on its gunfights, this is a major issue, and becomes frankly ridiculous later on in the series. This issue is compounded by the fact that even though the impacts are still supposed to hurt, literally no one seems to react when they are hit, beyond this one moment, of course. I know it sounds like I'm just taking a massive dump all over this movie, but I promise that's not the case. As a matter of fact, it's my love for this movie and the IP that has me looking at it with such a critical eye. When you've perfected the stunt work to such an extent that it becomes the sole reason that people watch your movie, it becomes necessary to take a look at the rest of your script and try to raise the rest of it to that level. I'm not saying that the John Wick team rested on their laurels or anything. The leap between the stunts of the first and second movie bear that out. What I am saying is that rather than focus on what they've already perfected, they should have given a little more time to the story, the world, and the characters. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time, so if you could do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate it. Every little bit really helps me out. Also, go ahead and check out the other videos on my channel, or hit up my website to see my blog and maybe buy one of my books on Amazon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.